that's my concern. That's what I don't want to have happen, is that wallets become another password. And I have to have like a key ring of a whole bunch of wallets hanging from it. And that's kind of where we're at right now. If you think about a wallet, I don't know if that's a great analogy, because a wallet just contains a bunch of other stuff in it. I have credit cards, I have identities, I have, coupons of things I've never used, right? There's all kinds of stuff in there. And I don't know, now that I think about it, if wallet is the analogy that we really want here. And that's my, as of, what's today? June 13th, staring at the mountains in a pontificating way opinion. What do you think, Joni?
Yeah. Ding, 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 right? Like if you have as many wallets as user IDs and passwords, this is totally failure, right? So yeah, that's definitely one of the concerns and one of the things to not do.
This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Steadman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Not so bad. Yourself?
Would it be okay if I started the podcast with a list of complaints? Would that be normal for the first few minutes of an Identity at the Center podcast?
It would be normal for you, yes, but I'm going to allow it because I know that you and I have been struggling with a myriad of technical issues for like the last month. Go for it. I'm guessing that's what you want to talk about.
Well, no, I do have a list, but I'm going to surprise you. I'm not going to complain. I had a whole thought about different things I could complain about, but I'm feeling super fortunate at the moment. The story I was going to bring out, hopefully folks have realized that we're publishing now to YouTube as well as to, all the audio podcast platforms. And I sat with Denise and we were watching one of the recent episodes and she's like, wow, Jeff's background, is that a green screen background? I'm like, no, that's his background. His background looks so much better than oh boy, here we go. Because you say the same.
I spent money on it.
Well, the bragging part on your own end, it's like, she's like, we got to upgrade your background game. So I don't have a timeline for y'all, but I can say this. All this behind us, as cool as it is for me, it's going to be upgraded. And I think what it is there's a whole room over there. The whole thing's going to be turned around. The only thing I can say is that, I'm not big on change. I like things to stay the same. So that's going to be a little bit hard for me, but overall, I think improvements are coming.
All right. Well, if you want to jump on a video call, I'll help you design it. I mean, most of streaming these days or recording is, visual quality, audio quality. Visual quality is camera and lighting. It doesn't matter really the camera almost, as long as you have really good lighting. And the audio is, I think we've got that locked down. Maybe not today. We've had so many technical issues with your stuff, but generally speaking, we have the audio kind of taken care of. But yeah, let's do it, man. I mean, I put a lot of time and money into my office. I was like, look, I spend all my time. I'm either there or I'm at an airport somewhere. So let me just get this set up and do it the way I do it. So I've got smart lighting in the background. Now, obviously not today. I'm in Las Vegas in a hotel room, but my home studio has the setup, and I'm happy with the way it works.
Yeah, well, Denise has decorated my whole house except for my office. And when people come over, they're like, "Oh, your house is so beautiful." Then they get to the office and they're like, "Okay," probably wondering why isn't your office beautiful?
Jim did this. That's why.
Denise, you did such a horrible job in the office. No, it was me.
Well, yeah, let's work on it. This is a work in progress, but yeah, we're doing the video more, trying to get better at that. Same thing, for my skill and video editing, it's still just you and I, when it comes to the podcast. So yeah, a lot of work goes into it. But if I ever get out of Identity, I feel like, well, I could do audio podcast editing or maybe some video podcast editing as a side gig, or maybe want to retire or something. I don't know.
You definitely could. It's you and I for every episode, but I think what makes the Identity Center podcast awesome is our guests. Today we have an awesome guest from the wonderful country of Canada, and I always thought, if I had to pick a country to move to, again, not big on change, it would probably be Canada. But like, here's the thing: when I think of like, oh, I watched something like Alone, right? And that's like up in like Great Slave Lake and like the top of Canada. I'm like, yeah, I would live there. Yeah, that would be like a 5-hour trip to Walmart. So you wouldn't have like, wired internet or anything. I don't know. So I love the wilderness that Canada has, but I'm also so addicted to convenience.
Well, I think once you fall into that lifestyle, I'm the same way. So I am not interested in moving to the wilderness. I want air conditioning. I want electricity, running water, good food. I have said it before. I'm an indoor cat, and I'm happy with that. But yes, we do have a great guest. We've got Joni Brennan. She's the president at the Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada, also known as the DIACC. Welcome to the show, Joni.
Awesome. It's so wonderful to be here. This is really one of the highlights of my career. Thanks so much for inviting me today.
So I, of course, prompted you to say that before we hit the record button. So, but I'll take it. I'm going to isolate that and just get a collection of people saying that when they come on the show. But why don't we get into it and really kind of learn more about your background? It's the thing we do whenever we have someone on for the first time is let's find out about Joni, right? What's her identity origin story? How did you get into this space? Is it something that you chose or did it choose you?
Yeah, well, thanks, actually. Probably a little bit of both. I'm also a member of the ID Pro board, and, I raised that because I think a lot of us who are in the identity industry did kind of fall into it or somehow, it wasn't necessarily a formal training for it. So I got my start. I went to Rutgers University in New Jersey. It was located physically right next to the IEEE Standards Association. So I had a exposure to standards and what they were. I kind of went straight out of communications and informatics degree at Rutgers into IEEE to work on as a webmaster, and that's old. And then there was a number of kind of non-traditional standards that were developing within that ecosystem. One of them, and I worked across many of them in my kind of web and tech role. One of them was focused on this topic of digital identity, and of all of the projects that I was working on, that digital identity one really spoke to me in terms of like the human technology intersection and kind of how impactful this would be for society versus, like, no offense to how do you hook up an interface with a printer, that's important, but how are people going to interact with technology and the identity layer? So I really kind of was drawn to that particular initiative, and from there, went from kind of being webmaster to being program manager for the software engineers in that initiative, which was the Liberty Alliance, and kind of stayed there and never left. So I got my whole identity management ecosystem education really just by being a part of the nonprofit standards, best practices ecosystem. And so I've been in nonprofit for my whole career and basically in identity for my whole career, 20 plus years now.
A lifer.
My the wall Go Scarlet Knights.
Woohoo! I need one of those.
Yeah.
It's somewhere. I need it digitally though.
Well, it won't be my background for long, but for now, it's there.
Love it.
Tell us about the Liberty Alliance. I think that's something that you mentioned before, and I guess I wasn't familiar with it. I've only been in identity for 20 years, so maybe I'm the rookie on the block, but tell me about Liberty Alliance. Like, what is that?
Yeah, so Liberty Alliance was an association, a membership association, industry standards association. And it was, if the audience is not familiar with Liberty Alliance, they may be familiar with a protocol called SAML, little thing called SAML, which is rumored to be dead, but is not dead, is still very much alive. So, standard SAML was developed in the OASIS Standards Association, and as SAML reached a point of maturity, another association called the Liberty Alliance formed, and that association formed to extend SAML and to really codify it for Federation use cases and to advance its adoption in Federation use cases and build more assurance criteria and risk management criteria around it. So yeah, so that organization was focused on that side of things. And I think I was there from, oh gosh, I want to say like 2003 until it reached its end of its life, until about like 2008, 2009. And yeah, it was quite the community. And through that effort and working on Federation and single sign-on and what that ecosystem of technologies had to offer, also saw the rise of things like another Canadian, Kim Cameron's 7 Laws of Identity and OpenID and OpenID Connect. And so it's been really interesting to see the progression from the SAML and Liberty Alliance days through to the technologies that were emerging, now established, and then the new protocol and models that are coming into the space. So yeah, it's an old school reference for sure, and it's always awesome to get to talk about it a little bit now.
So, Joni, with regards to Liberty Alliance, I'm going to throw you one from out of left field here. So, in my early identity days, I was familiar with Liberty Alliance. Was there a lot of involvement from folks from General Motors? Because I kind of always had in my mind that there was a big GM support or component of Liberty Alliance. So I'm asking you to put on your time machine and go back, I guess.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall, something like General Motors. It's I can't say that I recall specifically them. Lots of organizations. I don't remember the number right now, but definitely a substantial number of members. And in particular, some jump out like, the old Sun Microsystems gang and folks who were really putting forward, at the forefront of open standards development and open technology. So lots of amazing members and telcos and global footprint. So, but I don't remember if it was GM. So let's go ahead and say, yeah, GM was there and they were awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to take this for granted, though. I mean, going back 20 years, identity was not standards based. It was put agents on web servers, and that's how you would do authentication. And I think even when SAML came along, right, there were a lot of proprietary solutions kind of running after, solving the authentication problem. And then there was a standard SAML 1.0 and then 2.0 started up. Someone, and not just someone, but a lot of folks had to kind of get behind this and kind of rally around it. And nowadays, 95% of authentication is following one of the major standards, right? It's not, proprietary solutions with web server agents. And, it gives me the thought that authorization today is still like authentication was 20 years ago. Everybody kind of rolls their own when it comes to authorization. And it seems like it's an area ripe for standardization and kind of the same kind of path that you were involved in as kind of this old school identity person and kind of the Liberty Alliance driving forward the standards for authentication. I think it's important to acknowledge it, right? I'm going to, give you a high five here because it laid the groundwork for where we are today. If we're still where we were 20 years ago and it was all proprietary, I mean, it would be almost impossible to scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what you're touching on about authorization and how this ecosystem has evolved. I think one of the kind of both interesting and challenging things about the digital identity as a subject matter is there's so many lenses to look at it through. You can look at it through the authentication side, through authorization. I had a lot of wonderful opportunity to work with folks like Eve Mailer and her work on UMA and lots of different approaches there. And for identity, you could also be talking about consumer identity or enterprise identity or citizen identity. And from a patternistic perspective, the capabilities and what we're trying to achieve are, there's common patterns there. However, from a kind of an audience and a use case perspective, the, adoption, it certainly looks different when you're in the enterprise ecosystem and it's like, this is what you're going to do versus, okay, we want citizens to get on board with this, or we want to create delightful experiences for our customers and our clients. So yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things about identity is you can take so many different angles on it. And then about authorization particularly, I'm also really kind of interested. I'm always like thinking about people, just like how are people going to do this, and thinking about having things like consent and controls there, and like what's the line? Like one person loves the Android phone that you can tweak out all the things and do all the stuff, and and other people love the iPhone. It's like just set it up for me and give it to me, and I just want it to go. And so that's around authorization and around identity in general, particularly when you're dealing with the public. Kind of there's going to be different lines or different perspectives on what does the person want, and also then kind of what's best for them and what's best for the security and risk management of the situation. So I find those different lenses fascinating and challenging, but really fascinating about the different ways that we can look at this space.
Yeah, really. I feel like we could have an entire episode just kind of talking about that. We have had episodes talking about standards and how you drive from, I was thinking my initial thought was authorization and authentication. Like authorization is such a harder problem to solve than authentication, but that's today, right? I think at the time when you're looking at authentication, there was no common standard. It wasn't so easy to solve because there's probably a gravitation toward, well, we need to come up with a standard that solves every scenario, every use case. And I don't think that's the way you attack something like that. You have to say, what are the common use cases? It's not going to be 100%. Maybe it's 80%. And let's come up with a really good solution for that. And then what you find is that organizations kind of abandon those edge cases, and because getting on the standard has so much benefit that you don't want to be different.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
anyway,
and
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
No, I was going to move on to our next topic, which was around where you're at today, right? DIACC, DIACC. A lot of our listeners might not be familiar with DIACC. What is it that you all do? Why was the organization founded, and kind of what is your mission today?
Yeah, so DIACC is a nonprofit association. It was founded in 2012. It was founded through a group of public and private sector, so governments and private sector organizations who saw a common need to advance digital identity and authentication for the Canadian ecosystem. Now, the way that came about is there was during the global financial crash, 2008, 2009, the Canadian financial ecosystem weathered that storm arguably better than other jurisdictions. And so the federal government, the finance department at the time, did a study of the electronic payments, electronic payments ecosystem, and they brought together public and private sector representatives to recommend kind of what worked well within our financial ecosystem and what didn't work well, and where it needed to, where improvement would be good. Out of that report of that electronic payments task force, there was a recommendation that Canada's economy would benefit from a digital identity and authentication framework, that framework should be developed through a collaborative of the public and the private sector, and that it should be developed in a self-governing body, so that it was, not going too far toward only public sector priorities or too far toward only private sector priorities. So this is why actually the DIACC, what I, after this career in global standardization with Liberty Alliance and frameworks with Liberty Alliance and the Kantara initiative, I got the opportunity to come do this work in Canada. And one of the things that was so interesting to me was that the mission was actually to unlock Canada's full and beneficial participation in the global digital economy. And I was like, I haven't been in an identity organization that economic benefits for all was the mission. That was like really different. So I think it's unique in the sense that we use inclusive, accessible economic benefits for everyone in the global digital economy as that North Star to bring public and private to the same table. And then, we're developing, what we have developed, as a co-collaborative initiative is the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework, which really sits on top of standards. And so if you've got your SAMLs, your open IDs, your verifiable credentials, or open source as the protocol that you're deploying, the framework sits on top and codifies the risk management profile requirements to, around how you've deployed that standard. So that's like everything from how you've deployed the technology to, do you have insurance? Do you have confidentiality policies, and all of those pieces that help to ultimately de-risk the adoption of the solutions by different, whether that's by governments, private sector, or the public.
There was some research that you guys had put out too. And by the way, we'll have links in our show notes to a lot of this information. So you don't have to remember URLs and things like that. We'll just put in our links. But there was one around the potential problem of identity and branding. Do you want to, is that ring a bell, first of all? It sounds like it does. And what would you share with the folks who are listening here? Like, what is the synopsis of that so we can point them towards and kind of read the full research on it?
Yeah, thanks for that question. We've done 4 waves of research, Canadian perspectives on digital identity. We use a third-party qualified research firm, about 3,000 Canadians, coast to coast to coast. So we've got, through these 4 waves, and we're about to do the 5th this calendar quarter this fall. So we have both over-time data of consistently asking the same questions, as well as point-in-time data and asking questions that, mapped to what was happening during that particular, time. We have seen slight growth in, when we ask people, what does digital identity mean? We've seen slight growth in understanding of that. But over the course of 4 years, we've only seen kind of general ability to conjure a definition of digital identity only just crack over 50%. And, that's with assistance as well. So, what we find is that most people don't understand the words digital identity. Sometimes they think it means something totally different than what we're putting forward. Sometimes it's just very confusing. So we find about, but when we do explain what we mean by digital identity, we find that 55% of people are very supportive, 23% are unsure, and 22% are completely just against the idea. So, that research just helps us to know where we need to target our education, like what is that size and shape that 23% who are unsure. It also helps us to know that when we go out and we talk about digital identity to people, we just need to assume that they don't really know what we're talking about. And so often what we've been shifting to is words that are more naturally meaningful, like, maybe most people do seem to know authentication or credential or digital wallet. So we're moving more towards that kind of describe the action more than this word of identity that seems to be very confusing to the audience that we're speaking to.
So this definition of digital identity, this is something that we've asked in the past, and we've asked a lot of people, a lot of, identity, we'll call it. And what is the difference between IAM, Identity and Access Management, and digital identity? Because I'm curious to hear what your perspective is on this, because we've heard so far, everything that I thought would be a possible permutation of that answer. But every time someone answers it, they hear a new one. So from your perspective, what is the difference between Identity and Access Management and digital identity?
Yeah, I think when I think about identity and access management as a definition, I think about it more as the collection of technologies, practices, and processes for what I would call traditional identity management, more in the ecosystem of federation, single sign-on, enterprise identity. When I think about IAM, I think more of that space in maybe the more traditional sense of that collection of tools. When I think about digital identity, I think more in a more inclusive ecosystem of even including that traditional suite of technologies, practices, and processes and policies, to also including identity verification, identity proofing, the more kind of Web3 distributed identity, verifiable credentials. So when I think about digital identity, I think that the circle of different flavors of that, it widens for me and my thought. So I guess to make that really short, when I think of IAM, I think a little bit more kind of traditional, the foundations of everything that we've built on. And when I think digital identity, I think more just inclusive of the broad suite of models and technologies. Now, the other piece of that is what we have been shifting to as well, is we've actually been, and I don't know if we've just moved the problem further to another side of the coin, but we've been shifting more to digital trust. And digital trust is defined as the technologies, policies, and tools that help users to build confidence in their use of digital services. And I think that definition is more of kind of the output. It's more of what we're looking to achieve. Because what we ultimately want is we want our customers, our citizens, our clients, and employees, we want them to have confidence in the services that they're using and that they're interacting with. So we've been shifting actually to, just to throw another complication into it, we've been shifting to digital trust over digital identity. Because again, back to that first point, we find the digital identity hook to be really confusing on the other side for the listener.
Well, congratulations. Another new permutation in the never-ending saga of answers to this question. I think it's a fascinating question only because I don't think that there's a right answer. I think context is really the only driving force between how you would answer that question, because it's like, okay, well, what does digital identity mean to you, Joni? Is going to be different than what it means to Jim's dad, who we've talked about, versus, my wife, my dog, right? Other people who aren't in the business or have a different viewpoint. So I always find it fascinating when we get into this mix of, what is IAM? What is digital identity? How are they different? Are they different? Why are they different? And to me, it's the context. It's who are you talking to? And this idea of digital trust I find interesting because I'm not sure if it sits at a higher level than digital identity, or is it the same level as digital identity, or is it like an outcome of digital identity, meaning like it's kind of like not subordinate to it, but kind of the next level down from that. And I'm already playing in my head. It's like, well, I can argue all three. So I don't know if there's the right answer. Does that ever come into your mind when you're thinking about that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think foundational to our profession and our ecosystem is noodling away endlessly at definitions and what they mean and what we think they mean, and I'm here for it. I'm all for it. I love these conversations. So I think it's good that we kind of keep going through it and refining it, and I also think it's good that we shouldn't try to. It doesn't need to be one specific thing. I don't think we need to get it down to a power of one. Sometimes I think that's been a challenge in our industry too. One thing that really bothers me too when I hear even autocorrect on some tool that you're using to write a paper, or I would get a journalist that would kind of ask me questions. They always say, "A digital identity. Are you going to have a digital identity?" And I'm always like, don't say a digital identity. That's going to scare people. That's going to make them think like they're this targeted thing just moving through the space and time. So I think even there, it's like, I think it's a lot of fun and interesting and useful for us to go through those definitions together. I'm also just as equally and often more concerned about, do the adopters, whether that's lawyers or, law societies or governments or, private sector companies. What I care about is, do they see, what problem are they trying to solve, and do they see the value in what, the work that we're doing to help them solve that problem? And so I'm just as happy not to use the words digital identity when I'm talking to somebody on the other side, that, hey, we've got something that can help you. Let's speak the language that you speak and, help it make sense for you.
Mm-hmm. I'm in support of that. You mentioned digital trust, and I know there's a few things that the DIACC is working on now. I think there's a trust framework. I think we'll have a link in our show notes to that. Can you talk to us a little about what that trust framework is? What is it? Who is it intended for? Is it something that is freely available? Can anyone kind of use it? Is it, tell us more, why is this valuable for the community?
Yeah. So, in true Identirati fashion, what is a trust framework? We could get into what that is. And I've heard people use the words trust framework to mean federation. And then I'm like, I'm old, because that's a federation to me, what you're talking about. It might be even federation operator rules, I think, is more specific to what it is. But I think even that term trust framework can be confusing. So, what the trust framework is, and the way I describe it, is that it's a risk management and assurance framework. And I find that those words seem to be more naturally understandable for people on the other side. Why? Because what the framework is, it's a set of documents, digital documents, that have auditable criteria that step up in terms of their rigor, that help to help ensure that an organization has identified the risks, potential harms within its service, and that they've mitigated the risks within that service. And so if you think risk on one side of the coin, and when you're managing risk, you're building assurance because you're building more confidence. So kind of think about those two things on, two sides of a coin. So really it's this auditable set of criteria to help send a signal that you've managed risk. This is good because, we all need to measure. We have a responsibility to know that we've, identified potential harms and that we've managed them. So this is something we should always do for our customers, clients, and partners. It also helps by providing a tool, that organizations can use while they're building their services. So it can be guidance, prior to an audit. And, if you've used this framework to build your tool and then to get certified, it gives you a layer of liability mitigation as well, because you can say, hey, we've adopted this framework. The criteria is open, publicly available. You don't have to buy it. And we've gotten certified using third-party conformity assessment through information security auditors. So you can show that you've invested in identifying those potential harms and mitigating them, and had a third party verify that. So I think it's actually a really powerful tool that gets that's not always really understood in how it interplays with technology protocol and open source as part of that, those last miles to adoption, to de-risking and building confidence for that adoption. So it's all publicly available. You can find it on our site. It's also broken down into different capabilities. So there's one for digital wallets, again, not prescribing the technology, but prescribing the outcomes that those wallets should be needing. It's available in English and French if you speak both languages or one of those languages. And it's really been, again, back to our mission around global digital economy, inclusive, accessible benefits, is really intended for application by any organization that's operating in the digital economy. Although there are some pieces that are, of course, more fine-tuned to Canadian principles and the Canadian ecosystem, of course.
Well, we'll have that link in our show notes. That one's relatively easy. DIACC, DIACC.ca/trust-framework. But again, we'll have that in our show notes for people to check out. You sent over a bunch of links before, and I want to kind of pivot slightly because you're getting something a little near and dear to my heart, which is a podcast as well. So you've got a podcast, or at least the DIACC has a podcast. Is it called Pod Trust Talks and Digital Dives? Is that the name of it?
No, it's that's close though. It's called
Okay.
Trust Talks and Digital Dives.
Okay.
That's our DIACC pod.
Okay.
So yeah, Trust Talks and Digital Dives. We've just rebooted the podcast. Prior to that, it was Digital ID and Me. Back to eating our own dog food. We're finding digital ID isn't resonating, so we're moving in more to that language around digital trust, and I think that gives part of why we did that as well is to give a wider range of topics that can be covered under that header. So yeah, Trust Talks and Digital Dives, and we've had some amazing guests like the lead of our financial regulatory scheme. We've had some amazing leaders and doers and thinkers, and it's just such a privilege and an honor to be you guys you get to have many amazing conversations and raise those up for everybody to hear. So yeah, we invite people to give a listen, and if you have ideas on topics, let us know, and maybe you'll show up in our podcast one day in the future. We'd love to have you.
I'd be happy to. I think this is the great thing about the community is people are generally willing to share. There's very little secret sauce when it comes to identity. We're generally all fighting a common enemy in this case. Yeah, I get it. There's vendors out there, right? And there's some competition. But for the most part, I think the identity community is extremely welcoming of new content and things like that. So we're happy to promote it on our show and drive people. Hopefully you'll go check it out. So we'll have a link in our show notes for that as well. I know we've been talking for a little bit here, but you were at EIC. Was it last week or was it this week? Time doesn't mean anything. I'm in Las Vegas again, a week after I was in Identiverse for an entire week, so I don't know what day it is anymore. But tell me about EIC because I've never been. Jim's never been. We're angling maybe to try and get out there next year. But tell me about EIC. What was it like?
Yeah, so EIC was last week, and let me just preface that with there's so many amazing conferences in our ecosystem, and I think we could be at a conference almost every other week if we wanted to, or more, and some of us have done that. So there's loads and loads of great places to connect. EIC in particular is I love that conference because it's a place that I can make sure that we're forging and supporting those European relationships. And when I say European, remembering too that there's not just one flavor to what that means. There's perspectives in Germany, perspectives in Sweden. It can be very different. So it's a great place to kind of connect with that ecosystem, and it's one of the ones that I try to attend as much as I can. Identiverse is amazing. I'll be at Excite next week or 2 weeks in Toronto. So anyway, lots and lots of great conferences. EIC, I think that this year there was some interesting takeaways. I did actually do a list of takeaways on LinkedIn, and I mapped each one to a popular song, changing the title slightly. So if you follow me, you can find it there too. But in terms of takeaways, yeah, there may be, I think that there are a lot of pieces of the puzzle on the table to put together for digital identity. Like there's a lot of capabilities there. Let's take another little piece of my capabilities, Janis Joplin. So there's lots there to work with. And we're in a new level of maturity. I've got Protocol Wars Dead or Alive, Bon Jovi. That's we might be moving past the protocol wars and into as someone who lived through SAML, OpenID, and all these iterations, it's nice to be talking about how do we work across technology stacks. So I think that's a real sign of maturity for our ecosystem as well. Then we had Send in the Wallets, Barbara Streisand, and that's definitely driven by the European digital wallet initiative regulation that's come forward, which has codified particular technologies in as well. A lot of pilots in the US, DHS, SVIP, some particular German government funded pilots. So wallets. And then we had AI been everywhere, Johnny Cash. So, this is AI was kind of laced through all of the comments, all of the discussions, both in terms of what are the benefits going to be, what are the risks going to be going forward. And I think, as well as somebody who's been, seen technologies come and go, I personally think that there's AI is going to have more substantial impacts and less vaporware than some of the other things we've seen come and go. So it's good to see people talking about the the benefits and the harms in that space as well. So lots of great takeaways. Last one, and that I almost forgot was people are centered, the doors. And so this one was a comment that kind of slipped by me, but there was a presenter on the stage that said, the model for SSI is intended to be issuer holder verifier, not issuer wallet verifier, because it can be very easy to just kind of shift in. We're issuing the credential into the wallet. We're issuing the credential into the wallet, which then deletes the person, the holder, which is supposed to be in control of this data, which I'm guilty of too. So I was like, I have to remember that. That's a very good point. So yeah, lots of good takeaways. And I think it's going to be about, I just particularly love, can we start working on trust and assurance across different tech stacks? And I think wallets or some other PKI trusted containers are going to be interesting to see how they evolve over time. So yeah, great opportunity to connect over there. I hope you guys make it. It's a lot of fun. They're a really fun group to work with.
Yeah, I have to find that LinkedIn post. That sounds when you mentioned it, I thought, that's a cool idea. When you went through the actual songs and tie-ins to the topics, that's where I was pretty impressed. But the digital wallets, I would be remiss if I didn't kind of dig into that a little bit more. I would assume that was like kind of one of the biggest topics people wanted to talk about. Digital wallets and really the verifiable credentials, right? In my mind, the wallet carries the credentials, so there has to be the tie-in. What are kind of some of the key thoughts that you kind of like came away from the conference with relative to wallets and credentials?
Yeah. I think again, so I think the wallet, staying on brand, wallet can be an overloaded word. So I think we kind of love to lean into particular words, and wallet is it. But that might be some other trusted container, even with a browser or in a network. So I think that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. I think it's also what I really am keen to see is how both from a technical perspective and also from a trust, like assurance, because you could have the best perfectly formed verifiable credential, but if you haven't done the work to verify the information in it, then what good is that beautifully formed technical credential? So yeah, how does the technicals work, and how does the trust validated on both sides across different technologies? And so, for example, I see one ecosystem around Hyperledger Indy Aries and that that side of wallets and SSI, and then ecosystem around OpenID for VCI and OpenID for VP. Then you've got the the MDL ecosystem. So I think that ultimately what's going to be really fascinating is seeing how these different data models and different tech stacks, how will that play in wallets? How will that play in the wallet ecosystem? By the way, wallets aren't standardized, so I know that there are groups who are kind of working on parts of that as well. We're in the early days. So yeah, I think that's going to be a driver. Like, how do you get these credentials, present them or verify them across these different tech stacks? And then I also think that my personal belief is that when people have choices, that's an important part of building trust. Like, I can choose to use one thing or choose to use another thing, like building choice into the ecosystem is important for adoption. So I think as well, having certification schemes on the security and privacy features of wallets eventually will be important signals as well, for kind of how will issuers of credentials how will certification and potentially inform their governance? Or maybe it'll be, the Wild West. Here's your credential, put it anywhere. I don't have the answer to all these questions, but I do think that having a certification scheme or schemes that can signal that verification is another important piece of that ecosystem too. So yeah, wallets are it's going to be fascinating. And yeah, I'm curious to see kind of how it all evolves and how that evolves between independent wallets and large platforms, and maybe back to the beginning too, right? You're gonna have some people that want that Android phone. I want to like control every little thing and every little piece, and then you're gonna have other people that are just like, ooh, I don't know about all these buttons, and I don't know how this works. And so we're also gonna have to find ways through these new develop and implement ways through these approaches like digital wallets to also help people who need that easy button to have that easy button, and then the people who want to customize to do so. But the fact is that that's set by the risk tolerance of the ecosystem that's using it. So it's going to be cool space to see it evolve and hopefully play a role in that.
Yeah, I feel like you just covered the question I wanted to ask you, because I don't have skin in the game on this. I probably fall into more of that secondary camp where it's like, I just wanted it to work, you know? So I kind of feel like most people are going to be in that camp of like, what I really care about is the credentials, the mobile driver's license. Maybe it's like whatever the credentials are, like a university degree or something issued by my employer or organization that I'm part of. But I really don't care, because I look at the wallet like a container. Now, there's functionality tied to it, which is especially around the privacy. Like, I want to share this information, I don't want to share that information, and number of configuration settings. I don't really want to have to think about all those things. But I do kind of feel like even if like specialized solutions become kind of like the winner in the short term, I think the winner in the long term is going to be the platform. I guess I'd kick it to you and Jeff. Do you kind of see that as well? Or do you think that, hey, we're going to be walking around with like, corporation XYZ's wallet technology because it's the best and everybody agrees that it's the best, and Apple runs it, Microsoft runs it, Android or Google runs it, and like we've all just like said, it's just like Facebook. You can't live without it. Everybody has to have, this wonderful wallet. Which do you think is going to happen?
I kind of want to hear Jeff first, and then
Yeah,
cheat
there you
and
go.
take the last answer.
All right. Well, here's what I don't want to have happen. I don't want wallets to turn into another password. If I have to have a wallet to have all my other wallets in it, what did we solve for? That's my concern, and I think we've talked about this, and maybe I've mentioned in the past. And my viewpoint constantly changes as it evolves. But who's gonna be the responsible party for the wallet? And in today's climate, right? If it's political, if it's the government, 50% of the population is not going to like it. If it's financial, there may be accessibility issues with areas that don't have the financial means to be on that wallet, right? Or whatever that network might look like. If it's educational, again, there's disparities there as well. So, and then it's like, okay, well, do I run my own wallet? Like, how does that even, like, is that a thing? Right? Can Jim's grandpa, can I run my own wallet? I don't know how that would even work. That's my concern. That's what I don't want to have happen, is that wallets become another password. And I have to have like a key ring of a whole bunch of wallets hanging from it. And that's kind of where we're at right now. If you think about a wallet, I don't know if that's a great analogy, because a wallet just contains a bunch of other stuff in it. I have credit cards, I have identities, I have, coupons of things I've never used, right? There's all kinds of stuff in there. And I don't know, now that I think about it, if wallet is the analogy that we really want here. And that's my, as of what's today, June 13th, staring at the mountains in a pontificating way opinion. What do you think, Joni?
Yeah, ding, 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 right? Like if you have as many wallets as user IDs and passwords, this is totally failure, right? So yeah, that's definitely one of the concerns and one of the things to not do. As well, like back to that point about choices, you might have you will personal view, you'll definitely have some people who will not trust anything that says government issued wallet on it. You'll have people who might only trust something that says government issued wallet on it. So this kind of comes back to that piece about it's a strategically sound decision to purposefully build in choices into your model, so that the people who want to use an independent wallet can do so. The people who want to use a government one can do so. Also, that government wallet side of things, like, there is a responsibility to making sure that those capabilities can be there, provided by government. If you need to use them, you might not use them, but there are different layers there that are important too. And then kind of back to, like, this is where I think certification is important. And also, it's one thing to stand up a service, but to run that service over time, continue to evolve, continue to invest in security practices, that's a big commitment, right? And so there's going to be another group that's like, I just want to use the platform wallet that comes with my phone, that I've been using already for payments and things of that nature. And so what I try not to do is say, it should only be this one kind of wallet. I do think don't have, 30 of them. That's not going to be good. But, somewhere between, 1 and N, maybe 1 and 5, 1 and 3 is the right number. But definitely build choice into that ecosystem, because, you'll need to meet people's, you'll have to meet people's needs, and my own, we also sometimes have to separate here the big tech governance challenges that we're all part of. We live in a data ecosystem, and it's data surveillance kind of based internet and ecosystem. So that's what we live in. So there are the very big tech governance challenges that are really hard to unwind and require, policy regulation, all of that. By the same side of it, if somebody said to me, like, do you want Apple between you and all of your things? And then I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, maybe I've made some choices already about what I want between, me and my things. And so, but that said, Apple is a pretty high price tag too, if like paying for some of that. I make that choice in that ecosystem for privacy and personal data protection, but maybe not everybody, can make that. And certainly not everyone can make that investment. So yeah, I just come back to it is a bit of the innovative, maybe even messy front end of change. There's still, this is like everything in our industry. There will be evolution, there will be a proliferation of these things, and then there will be consolidation around these things. And so having a common set of core principles and getting this more and getting wallets into a standardized ecosystem, and I think ideally having some certification signals around it. These are all going to be important parts of the puzzle, but definitely not 30 or 40 wallets. I hope not to wake up with that. I will cry.
If it ends up like that, Joni, I've got your next song title for it, and you don't even have to change the name. Beautiful Disaster by 311. So there you go. Let's wrap up this conversation, because you've been really generous with your time, and I want to keep it on the music side of things. Joni, you and I were kind of talking before we hit the record button, and kind of sharing some EDM appreciations that we both have. I know Jim's not so much into the EDM. He's more of a country guy. But I'm going to open this up to everybody, and Joni, we'll start with you. What is a underrated or maybe undiscovered band, musical act, something that like, wow, these guys are really good. I wish more people knew about them. Do you have anybody that's like you think is kind of flying under the radar from your perspective?
Yeah. Flying under the radar. Yeah, I think that there's, tons out there. I think, and also, like, there's such a range of music, right? Like, it's a little sad, but I find that, now with like all this accessibility to music, sometimes I know the songs and I don't even know the artist anymore. And I'm just like, no, I know I dropped that on that playlist. So I hit that playlist and I go. So that's depressing. I have to work on that. But I think if it was like in the EDM ecosystem, there's so many producers. One is G. Jones, who may be a little less known. There is, maybe he's not less known, but I am such a fan of Marc Rebillet. I love, he's a online improvisationalist. So if you don't know him, you got to get to know him.
He's a tough one, because it's like you can't you have to recommend the performance, not like a specific song, because if you know Marc Rebillet, everything is improv, and he's like in the middle of a street doing something, or in his studio and streaming something. And yeah, I'm a fan of Mark Rebier as well. But it's
Awesome.
it's difficult. It's like you can't just say, well, I want to go listen to this song or even this album. It's just go watch a YouTube video and just watch what he does, which is amazing.
Definitely.
That's a good one. I haven't thought about him in a little while, but yeah, that's a good one. Jim, about yourself? What's like a under the radar band or music? And I guess it doesn't actually have to be like new, right? I mean, I think people are always discovering new music. Maybe it's something that's been around for a while. And like, what are you thinking about?
So what I was thinking about was I just saw Morgan Wallen for the first time this weekend. I don't think anybody could claim he's flying under the radar, right? He's not flying under the radar. Also, didn't get to see it, but Carrie Underwood performed in the same festival. Again, not flying under the radar. I think about people like Chris Stapleton, Luke Combs, all not flying under the radar. But there's another
You're
one.
picking people who are flying way above the radar.
Way above the radar. Okay, so now I'm going to go down a level in terms of radar. Riley Green, he's not under the radar if you follow country music, but just unbelievable. His lyrics are unbelievable. He's really good, but really not under the radar either. I would, one other that I didn't mention, above the radar, Jelly Roll. Again, like everybody knows who these people are. Now I'm going to mention one that is under the radar, I think. Dave Fenley. Probably there's going to be some people out there like, everybody knows Dave Fenley. So look up Dave Fenley, and he does a cover of Stuck on You, which is the old Lionel Richie song. And it's crazy. When you hear somebody do a cover and you're like, oh, that's so much better than the original. There you go. There's a cover so much better than the original of a really great song. And just his voice. I mean, this is a guy who you're going to hear about. He'll be a headliner at some point.
Mm-hmm. So I know half of those names you mentioned. I'm just not into the country side of things. But okay, so that's a good one. Let me think. I've got a couple. Rez, R-E-Z-Z, on the EDM side of things. I think she's a brilliant producer, creator, whatever we're calling EDM people at this days. I think that one's fantastic. And this is old school, but the Orb. So this is like from the 90s, I want to say, kind of an electronic music, but Orb's Adventures in the Underworld is like it's a classic EDM album, but it is like just super chill and so many different layers and beats and samples and all kinds of stuff going on. It's a classic. It's definitely worth checking out. It's an experience. Like you sit there, you put your headphones on and just kind of get into the music and just kind of vibe to that. So I'll say Rez and the Orb. I think the Orb is a little maybe too old. People need to kind of rediscover it, but I don't know if many people know about Rez unless you're sort of into the electronic scene. I don't know. Joni, do you know Rez?
She wears cool glasses. Yeah, she's got.
She does. Yeah,
wild.
she's got the little like spiral things. Yeah, so and she's a great entertainer. So
yeah. Well, were you guys Sesame Street fans?
Well, I mean, I watched it. Define fan. Like,
do you remember the pinball song? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Do you know who does that song? Do you know who does it? The Pointer Sisters. There you go. Right. Pointer Sisters.
Okay, there they go.
Yeah. I just recently learned that. Sorry, it blew my mind, I think.
No, that's fantastic. I forget all the Jenny stuff. If you listened all the way to 59 minutes, that was the most important thing we learned all day today. No offense to any of us.
All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah, we had a great time, and it was such a fun conversation. We'll wrap it up here. We'll have links in our show notes, and you can connect with Joni on LinkedIn, learn more about the DIACC. I'll put links in there to a bunch of different sort of like little pieces of info research and to the podcast that you guys do, all that good stuff. And Jim and I were happy to be guests whenever you'd like us. Just let us know. We're happy to share opinions either on this show or anyone else. So we're happy to do that. Let's see what else. Jim, I know the YouTube channel. I will get it out there. youtube.com/@IDAC podcast. We're continuing to incorporate video into the podcast, so appreciate a like and subscribe. Share with a friend, share with an enemy, doesn't matter as long as they hit that like button or subscribe button or both. Let's see, web idacpodcast.com, Twitter or X, at IDAC Podcast, Mastodon, IDAC Podcast at infosec.exchange. And yeah, I think that's it. Anything else, Jim? Did I forget anything? Did I get it? Did I get it right?
You got it right, man. Especially the YouTube channel, but we love our audio-only listeners. Heck, I'm an audio-only listener, so I don't want to watch us on video, but even if you don't watch us on video, just go out and subscribe anyway because it helps us.
Yeah, let it play and just in the background and, entertain your children. They've got to learn about the world. And what better way than to start with identity? Maybe we'll start marking ourselves as like kids content. We'll put I don't know. Oh, maybe we can, Joni. So you mentioned Sesame Street. Does that qualify? That this is now kids content? Can we mark this one? I don't know. We'll find out. Okay, that's it. We'll leave it for this week. Thanks everyone for watching and or listening. And we'll talk with you all in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.